This was a scenario that someone on Discord suggested me to do. Anyway, the Beerus we know sleeps for several years, sometimes several decades, before waking up and destroying however many planets he sees fit. Instead of trying to coordinate his efforts with the Supreme Kai, he destroys planets on his own judgment. So, he often destroys important planets without a second thought. He often finds his job bothersome, so he appoints someone to be an agent of destruction, such as Frieza. What if that was different, though, and Beerus actually took his job seriously? We don't know why he doesn't take it seriously, but I assume it's just his personality that causes him to act like that. Since we don't know enough about his backstory, there isn't one specific change on the timeline we could make. The change would just have to be that his personality developed differently, so he isn't a lazy god of destruction, but a more active god of destruction that does his job as intended. This also means that he doesn't take years-long or decades-long naps in this timeline. He likely just sleeps at night like normal people. Beerus taking his job seriously in this timeline would mean that he coordinates his destruction with the Supreme Kais. This way, he is destroying planets that would need to be destroyed, instead of him just destroying planets at his own discretion. His better handling of his destruction duties would indirectly allow the Supreme Kais to do their job better as well. So, the mortal level of Universe 7 would be higher than usual. The mortal level would also likely increase as time goes on, since Beerus and the Supreme Kais are managing their duties better in this timeline. Though Beerus and the Supreme Kai still have their coordination meetings where they go to each other's realms every 1,000 years. Normally at one of these meetings, about 75 million years before age, Beerus got into a trifling argument with the Elder Kai and stealed him away in the Z-Sword. This time, since Beerus is more competent at his job and he is working with the Supreme Kais, he wouldn't steal the Elder Kai away like this. Anyway, some of the next events I talk about will be a little all over the place timeline-wise, since we don't know the exact point in the timeline that they happened, we just know that they happened. I will try to keep the events in timeline order the best I can, though. One time, he stopped by King Kai's planet, which was bigger back then, but once it got into a game and Beerus lost, he destroyed the planet. This time, since he's working with the Kais, I don't see him playing around with petty games like this and destroying King Kai's planet, so it is never reduced in size. There was another time Beerus and Champa got into an argument after Beerus ate the only Puff Puff fruit on their birthday cake. It usually calls them to fight throughout the universe, thus destroying many planets in the process. With Beerus taking his destruction duties more seriously, he might hold back from fighting with Champa around the universe, but instead, they do still get into some kind of spat with each other. Typically, this was resolved with them agreeing to have food showdowns instead of fighting showdowns, so maybe they just come to that agreement earlier instead of fighting in the first place. There was also a time Beerus went to Earth and the dinosaurs took a rude attitude towards him, so he went to wipe them out. From what I read on the Dragon Ball Wiki, it said this was thwarted by a time-traveling Arale, as she saved the dinosaurs, so that's why they're still around in the Dragon Ball world. It never would have happened here, though, since Beerus isn't that hot-tempered in this timeline, so he doesn't try to wipe out the dinosaurs. Apparently, Arale's thwarting of the dinosaurs' extinction caused the creation of the Earth's moon, so that doesn't happen in this timeline either. Regardless, around 10 million years before age, this is when Moro originally threatened Universe 7. The Grand Supreme Kai and South Supreme Kai were normally the ones who defeated him and imprisoned him in the Galactic Prison, but that might be different here. Moro's attack usually brought about the end of life on 320 planets, but with Beerus being more active in the universe, he would confront Moro early on in his rampage. So, Beerus would erase Moro before he could continue to eradicate life on planets like this. The next change would happen around 5 million years before age. Normally around this time, Bibidi awakens Majin Buu, who then goes on to destroy thousands of planets. Originally it was the Supreme Kais that tried to take on Buu, but again, I think it would be Beerus this time. After all, he is taking his duties seriously and handling his duties by himself in this timeline, so he wouldn't let Buu go on his destructive rampage. Instead, he would erase Buu, and he'd likely erase Bibidi as well since he was the one to awaken Buu. Beerus doing this also means that the Grand Supreme Kai, North Supreme Kai, West Supreme Kai, and South Supreme Kai are never absorbed or killed. The next change would be around 239,856 years before age, which in the manga, Zeno holds the All-Universe Hide-and-Seek tournament around this time. During the tournament, Beerus fell asleep for about 50 years. Since Zeno was enjoying the event, and Beerus falling asleep led to it being cancelled, this angered Zeno. Ever since that, the other 11 gods of destruction felt disdain for Beerus, so they had to calm down the angered Zeno. However, since Beerus doesn't take naps like that in this timeline, the tournament never would have been cancelled. By extension, Zeno never would have been angered, so the other gods wouldn't grow to have disdain for Beerus. I originally planned to talk about King Cold and Frieza next, but then I thought about something. It isn't likely that these two were the first ones within Frieza's family to start their empire. While Chilled isn't necessarily necessarily canon. There likely would have been an ancestor of Frieza's that filled that role, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to keep it as Chilled, so I'll discuss him. Besides Chilled being an ancestor of Frieza, there's two things that need to be said about him. He was a space pirate, and he would conquer planets along with wiping out their inhabitants. This wouldn't fly with Beerus in this timeline, since he is more serious about his job. So, when he's informed about Chilled and what he is doing by the Supreme Kai, he would pay him a visit. After all, he couldn't simply allow Chilled to potentially lower the mortal level of the universe by wiping out the inhabitants of different planets. When he goes to visit Chilled, this would be around 1,104 years before age. Regardless, he would easily be able to erase a space pirate. Normally when Chilled died in the episode of Bardock, he mentioned something about warning his family about the Super Saiyan, so that obviously wouldn't happen here. Chilled wouldn't mention his family. Beerus still might find out about them, though, since he likely asked Whis if there are more creatures like Chilled out there. So, this could end up with Beerus destroying their home planet and the rest of their race. Obviously, this would prevent King Cold and Frieza from ever existing. This brings us to an alien race that could be greatly affected by the lack of King Cold and Frieza, the Saiyans. According to statements by Akira Toriyama and from guidebooks, the Saiyans didn't get conquered by King Cold until after they already made Planet Plant their new home planet by wiping out its inhabitants. This means that they already had access to space travel and were conquering planets on their own, so you can probably see where I'm going with this. Since the Supreme Kais are more competent in this timeline, they might inform Beerus about the Saiyans taking out other planets and killing their inhabitants. So, like what Beerus did with Moro, Boo, and Chilled, he would go to the Saiyans' home planet. The result is probably obvious, but he would erase them as well so that they couldn't wipe out any other planets. He might wipe out the Saiyans that are off on missions at this time, too, so that they couldn't try to restart a Saiyan planet. Anyway, since Beerus erased all the Saiyans, he obviously couldn't get the premonition about the Super Saiyan God from the Oracle Fish. This soon brings us to the time that Dragon Ball would normally begin, but things would be massively different. With all the Saiyans having been erased, Goku obviously never would have been sent to Earth. Assuming the Earth is still around, things on the Earth might eventually take a dark turn. At first, Gohan would likely help Bulma through her initial journey, so Emperor Pilaf would be thwarted. Since Gohan never would have chased down the Dragon Ball he had afterwards, no one would get in the Red Ribbon Army's way, so they likely take over the Earth. Assuming King Piccolo is still accidentally freed by the Pilaf gang, he would easily be able to overthrow the Red Ribbon Army. He would wipe out the Earth's population over the years, but without the Saiyans being around, Raditz would never come to Earth, so King Piccolo would still be in power at that time. However, he could potentially be taken out by the androids if Dr. Gero somehow survived and went into hiding to create them. Though even with the androids taking out King Piccolo, as we saw in the future timeline, 17 and 18 would wreak havoc on the Earth, too. After all, without time travel having happened in this timeline, this would be the future versions of Android 17 and 18. No other threat that normally arrives on the Earth would show up, except maybe Beerus. As mentioned earlier, he knew about the planet Earth, so he might check on it again at some point, when he sees the state that it is in now, which is devoid of life. He and the Supreme Kais might agree that it should be destroyed so a better planet could be created. So, he would erase the Earth if they came to that agreement. Without Goku having been around, Zamasu would have never devised his Zero Mortals plan since he wouldn't have fought a mortal trained by the gods. Also, Goku never would have interacted with Zeno to suggest a tournament of power, though as revealed after the tournament ended, Zeno never actually intended to erase the universes unless a selfish wish was made, so it would never come to a point where Zeno was considering erasing the universes. Regardless, Beerus would remain in power as the god of destruction. In this timeline, Universe 7 would be thriving under his and the Supreme Kai's way of developing the universe. Over time, the mortal level of the universe could end up being one of the highest mortal levels of the 12 universes. Eventually, it's possible that Universe 7 could become the highest universe in terms of mortal level. Regardless, even if they do reach that milestone, since Beerus isn't lazy in this timeline, he wouldn't slack on developing Universe 7. So, both Beerus and the Supreme Kais would continue to work together on developing and improving Universe 7 over the years, even after they became the universe with the highest mortal level.